professor who is also my pastor, and he gave me this one question in class that has always stuck with me as a great barometer of our worldview. And the question was this: if you could take all of your prayers that you've prayed over the last 30 days, add them all up, and they could be answered exactly the way that you prayed for them, would it have a greater impact on the kingdom of self or on the kingdom of God? Take that one with you. But ladies, let's get started on this panel. Bunny, you are, as I said, the founder of Christians Engaged, which has recently partnered with the Family Policy Alliance. For those of us who may not be familiar with what Christians Engaged is, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Well, it's great to be with you and love the Family Foundation. Yes, first of all, my name is really Bunny. That is on my birth certificate. I knew you guys were going to ask, so I wanted you to know that. Grew up a pastor's kid, got involved with politics 20 years ago, running congressional campaigns, and I had one of the largest consulting firms in Texas, working with our Tea Party social conservative candidates, and then blew up my life, I affectionately say, in 2018, running for Congress. Almost won a runoff in Texas for my former boss's seat, Jeb Hensarling's seat in Texas. But the genesis of Christians Engaged was 16 pastors invited me into their churches because my husband and I also pastored, and we led worship and prayer conferences in our city. And they wanted to support the woman that knew federal public policy, knew politics, and loved Jesus, right? But I realized real quick, these people were not voting in primaries and runoffs and local elections and not even general elections. So I loved being with Dr. Barna today because I quote him all the time, right, about his statistics on Christians not voting. But that was the genesis. And so in Texas, we started the beginning of 2020. I know, crazy time to start a new nonprofit. We got up to 79,000 Christians in our Get Out the Vote system we built. So we built a system, which you guys have a card on your table there. We're asking every Christian in the country to make a commitment to pray for 5 minutes a week for their nation. I know, big ask, right? To start voting in every election. If we remind them, will they vote in every election? And will they start engaging in some form of civic education or involvement for the well-being of the country? So we built this for Texas. By the end of 2022, we had 79,000 Christians in Texas going into churches, on social media, etc. And 91.7% of them voted in the midterm election in 2022. 30%, yes, I know, praise the Lord. 30% had no primary history, and 20% had never voted before. So I'm like, okay, we're on to something. Well, a year and a half into the ministry, we got denied our tax-exempt status by the IRS. You might have heard about us, Christians Engaged. We became national news. I went on Fox News all the time, and First Liberty took our case to push back against the IRS because they said Bible teachings are typically affiliated with the Republican Party and candidates. So therefore, if you're teaching on the sanctity of human life, biblical marriage, debt and taxation, these things are inherently Republican, therefore you're not nonpartisan. That's exactly what they said in their letter, okay? Well, praise the Lord for the IRS, because they got us national, right? And all of a sudden, I had thousands of people around the country taking my pledge to pray, vote, and engage, and we'd built an on-ramp to civic engagement class and a local government class. And it just blew us up where now I have to go build a 50-state solution. And I discovered that there was no ministry in the country that had actually built a safe, data-protected system for the body of Christ, for national ministries and local churches to all partner with. So we built it. Yay. And so we built that. We built $200,000 worth of on-demand video curriculum, a whole campaign school, biblical worldview, biblical justice, biblical economics, on-ramp to civic engagement, local government, and built a church outreach program with over 100 churches, and then a young adult program. So this is all going. We got up to 200,000 Christians. I launched my book, Jesus in Politics, which I have a few copies out in the lobby if you want to pick up a copy before I have to run to the airport. But then Craig DeRoche, the CEO of Family Policy Alliance, calls me and says, hey, I'm looking at everything you guys have just built. We need all of this. We need the Get Out the Vote system. We need a church outreach program. We need a young adult program. We need all this curriculum. And in essence, he said to me in April is, how do we become family? And so our little team of 5 in Texas merged. Our boards came together, and we said, let's become family and be the voter mobilization system for the family policy councils around the country. And we doubled their programs overnight, and they gave us a 25, 30-year network that we couldn't have built on our own. And this is a God story. I'm telling you, it's a God story. So what we have here today is the launch of our partnership with the Family Foundation here in Kentucky, and we're about to take over Kentucky, guys. So get ready. Let's start doing church outreach. Let's get this into every church in the state, and let's push out the vote for every election and actually teach them the Bible and biblical worldview as we do it.
Yeah, I thought it was very interesting that so close to this event, with Dr. Barna being our keynote speaker, that he had just released updated statistics on the complete lack of Christian engagement in this upcoming election. So thank you for what you do. Thank you for your ministry. We're excited to partner with you. We hope it'll be a great blessing to us here in the Commonwealth. Sue, turning to you, this election cycle, pro-life causes are on the ballot, whether it be in individual states or the pro-life issue in the presidential election. One of the things that has been a huge discussion, or was a huge discussion, was President Trump's comments on Florida's Amendment 4 ballot initiative, which has really brought attention to all of the ballot initiatives across the country. I think there's 11 or 12, something around there. We don't currently have one on the ballot in the state of Kentucky, but why should we care about what's going on in these other states?
Well, that's a great question. So thanks for having me. It's great to be back. Well, Roe versus Wade is gone, as you know, but the devil is back with a vengeance. There are ballot amendments in 10 states right now, and others, they just keep coming every day. I wake up and there's more. Most of them are for abortion on demand, anytime up until birth, eliminating parental consent for minors. Ultimately, they want our taxpayer dollars to pay for abortions. And also, make no mistake, it's not just about abortion. This is a Trojan horse for transgender. So these aren't just abortion amendments. And here's the trick. And so if this happens in Kentucky in the future, you heard it here first. When we read those questions, we read questions like, should persons have the ability to reproductive health care? Okay, persons, it didn't say woman. The Florida Amendment doesn't say woman anywhere. It says persons. Persons could be a man, it could be a boy, it could be a girl, it could be a minor, it could be an adult. So when we all read it, we think, oh, it's woman and abortion, right? We can't assume any of that anymore. Reproductive health care, we think it means abortion. It means trans stuff. And of course, if you think about it, that's Planned Parenthood's newest cost center, right? So that's where, follow the money, and actually read the words. And most importantly, and I know Dr. Barna would love this, discern. Discern what you're reading. Discern what they're saying. And who's saying it, and why. Unfortunately, we've seen in Ohio most recently, Michigan before that, Kansas, we've seen, and I know you saw it in Kentucky too, people reading it, not understanding what it meant. People thought it meant the other thing, and so it voted the other way. And the TV commercials and the advertisements that the other side, because they have unlimited money, $60 million in Ohio. We couldn't match that. We spent 28, something like that. That's a lot of money for the pro-life movement, right? $28 million. That's more than your average banquet, So, but we're outspent, and they lie. They scare people, and we don't discern. So that's a message that I came for you today. But it's also on the ballot generally. So this is a presidential year. It's the whole election. So the Vice President Harris and her running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, this is the most extreme abortion agenda that's ever been on the ticket in America. In the United States, this is the most extreme pro-abortion. They're going to have, if they're elected, and then we'll have to see what happens in Congress, the House and the Senate, if they'll go along with them. But they'll have abortion back in every state, regardless of what your state did, and they have said so. We have to believe them. So even though Kentucky has strong limits on abortion, don't close your eyes to the national picture. We need a national limit like other countries. Most countries on the planet have some sort of limit on abortion up to first trimester. I'm not saying I'm for this, okay? But up first trimester, 15 weeks, something like that. Most countries on the planet understand that late-term abortion is barbaric and is super wrong, as if abortion's not wrong. But my point is, the media and even Trump himself has said he doesn't support a ban, a national ban. That's not what we're going for. Susan B. Anthony is supporting states like Kentucky and others that are limiting abortion all the way back to conception. But states like California, New York, Illinois, and others, we want to see a national limit of when a baby can feel pain. So even though states can do what they want, California, New York, those guys, they're not doing what we want them to do. They're not protecting life. They're going all the way up to birth. In the United States of America, we should not be doing that anywhere, regardless of what the Dobbs decision said you could do. So we think that both are true. That a national limit is important, at least when a baby can feel pain, and then we work real hard in the states as well and do the best we can to limit abortion anywhere we are. So it wouldn't hurt Kentucky in any way, what I'm saying. Kentucky would still be where Kentucky is, but California, New York, now we're talking.
So, Addia, you head up Kentucky Right to Life. So let's zoom in on the Commonwealth for a minute. How are we doing as a state in the pro-life movement, and what can we do better?
Thank you. First of all, thank all of you for being here. Thank you, Dave and the Family Foundation, for inviting us all to be on the panel and to share this discussion. We have moved from a few years ago, ranked number 21 in the nation, to being in the top 12, because there's a lot of folks at the top of the leaderboard that have eliminated abortion in their states. We have shut down Planned Parenthood. We've shut down EMW. But let me tell you, first of all, keep in mind, they are not going away. As we look at these constitutional amendments, and we look at the battle for the hearts and souls and mind and a worldview, they are not going away in this battle. And I will say that because the last time we were in court, just a few months ago, on a buffer zone case, our brilliant attorney asked the Dr. Marshall, EMW, have you renewed your license? Now, the building's for sale. And guess what? We already knew the answer, right? Attorneys don't ask a question. And they said yes. So if they think it's over in Kentucky, they would have never renewed a license to perform abortions as a service here in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. So they are keeping their license engaged, hoping and praying and looking at anything that they can do to undermine the state of abortions here in Kentucky and to return. So I give that to you just to keep that in the back of your mind. I'm going to take a little personal privilege here. Well, actually, David gave me the privilege. Aaron Izzo, are you still in the room? Stand up for a minute. Aaron Izzo, ready for Supreme Court of Kentucky. Thank you. She will need your support, and David Walz had asked me to make sure we introduced you, and sorry that wasn't done earlier, but she will need every bit of your support, because the battle, when we make a legislative strides, our battles are now in the courts. And I will tell you right now, we are losing our courts in Kentucky. And we have calculated that will be a 6 to 7 year return to recapture and we've got a plan. Aaron's part of it. But we've got a plan, but it's going to be a tough battle for the courts. And I share that because long ago we said, once you pass the laws, then you battle at the court level. And the other side is brilliant to that effect. Now I want to talk, is there any members of the media here, by any chance? Members of the media? Hello. Thank you for being here. Did you feel like you were at church? Okay, so if you report on this story, I hope you will share that this was it's kind of a private. It's like church here. We're preaching to the choir. We're sharing our stories and our beliefs with one another who are like-minded. But so if I'm going to reveal any plans for the next session, because the media is here, it won't happen. But we have plenty of work to do here in the Commonwealth. Right now, we need everyone to get out to vote. Obviously, some of you know that there were legislation proposed last year that we worked hard with the Family Foundation to put the stops on and the brakes on, and that's to return Kentucky, to return to exceptions, to give misinformation here in Kentucky, and undermine those laws that have been passed. And those laws have been passed because of all of you, because of those individuals that you sent to Frankfurt to be your voice. As a former legislator, I know what it's like. You go there with a moral compass. If the North starts to fall off your compass, if that needle starts to twitter and fall sideways, you are in trouble. First, your own soul is in trouble. And then you are betraying the very purpose that a legislator came there. So our work, Family Foundation, other organizations, Kentucky Right to Life, is to come alongside of legislators, talk to them about the policies we put in place, and try to hold that north needle to the north. That's what you've entrusted us to do. So far as the laws in Kentucky, I think David earlier showed you that every law is intact. When we had our constitutional amendment, it was a 48%. It was tough. I serve on a national ballot initiative panel, so I get to hear and visit and speak with all the states that may or may not have ballot initiatives, and I always say to them, don't do it. Don't do it. Can you stop it? Because the other side, they don't really have more money than God. I know we say that, but they don't. But they have so much money. They are a cartel. They are an industry. And the amount of money, like they spend here in Kentucky, we were outspent 9-1. And I asked them, why do you call me? Well, they said, well, you came closer than any other state. Outspent 9-1. But the money, I'm working with them in Florida right now. I'm not supposed to talk about Kentucky, but this is important. I do want to ask you, if you have family or friends in states that have a ballot initiative, please reach out to them and ask them, remind them, and beg them to vote. In Florida, we have a lot of people who winter in Florida. We have a lot of people who are now are residents of Florida, Kentuckians, because they spend much of the year down there, six months of the year. Please go and vote no. Every day I'm going over the commercials that are done in other states. That you thought the commercials here were unbelievable. You should see the sophistication of the commercials going on around the country on this issue. It is an industry, it is a cartel that has industries, other businesses and industries giving them money, and they have more money than you can believe to spend against life, to spend on terminating the life of an unborn child. So life is on the ballot, but in other states, but it's also on the ballot here. It's on the ballot with those that you elect. David asked me, and I did bring copies. We brought copies of, we do a thorough review of every candidate on the ballot. Every candidate, not just where they stand, how they answer our questionnaire, but their voting history. We have a pack. So Kentucky has 3 organizations, Kentucky Right to Life. There's Kentucky Right to Life, that piece that is our collection of our chapters throughout the Commonwealth. So we are a voice of members from around the state. And we also lobby in Frankfurt. We also have a 501c3 that is the educational arm. And then, way over here is a 527, which is the PAC. And that is where the evaluation of every candidate that is on the ballot, not just how they answer a questionnaire, but what they're doing when they're spending their days at the Capitol, how they vote and how they respond. So life is on the ballot. The next session, we still have much work to do. we get calls, I get calls often from the media saying that doctors do not want to come and practice in the Commonwealth of Kentucky because they can't perform abortions. Now, I'm sorry, I'm a registered nurse and a bioethicist first. And I will say that I do not know one physician that enters the practice of medicine with the intent of taking a life. And if you, physician, do not want to practice medicine in Kentucky because you can't kill babies, then we really don't want you here. So we don't need you in our medical schools, and we don't need you in our hospitals and healthcare, and we hope that you will change your mind. But if that is the sole reason that you are going to medical school, we have a problem in medicine. We have a problem with that worldview. So again, there will be some initiatives next session. We're already beginning to look at issues that we need to address. I'd love to share them with you here, but those are for the legislators after they're elected. We have some that are here, and we'll begin to work with those and with legislators and with Family Foundation after the election in November. That's when the work of next session starts. Thank you.
And I think it's also important to mention, for those of you who do have family in states where these initiatives are on the ballot, but also for Amendment 2 here in the state of Kentucky, if you bubble the Republican or the Democrat bubble, it does not impact the vote on those ballot initiatives. So you need to be sure when you're voting, if you do choose that, make sure you go and you vote for your Supreme Court candidates, all of your nonpartisan, and also your ballot initiatives, because that does not impact those other particular races. So just be aware of that. Bunny, returning.
Can I have just one thing that they made?
Sure.
Just one more point that you may not be aware of. Why we've restricted abortion in Kentucky, except for the life of the mother. Illegally, handfuls, buckets, shipments of illegal abortion pills are flooding into the state by repackagers, by illegal organizations. So we are looking at that, what can be done. It is very dangerous if you look at the case in Georgia. And the media said it was like she wasn't cared for because they didn't perform abortions. No, her death was caused because of these medications. Sometimes we get a call at our office because they know, they'll see I'm a nurse, and they'll say, I have received these pills. I don't know what to do with them. Young girls are getting them. They're coming into, one girl got a package. It was called her kill pack, a triple kill pack sent to her dorm room. We hear from our pregnancy care centers. I'm sure some of those are here today, and thank you for everything you do. But they're witnessing every day when girls come to their center or call with a handful of pills already in their hands. So we will be looking at that very dangerous, very extremely dangerous what is occurring here in Kentucky. So I just wanted to make the public aware. We are very much aware of what's happening. Thank you.
Bunny, returning to just the election in general, pastors are often, hesitant to address what they see as political matters from the pulpit. Is this fear justified? Is it not? If it's not, what more should pastors be doing, and how can your organization help them?
It is not justified. We're living as Gnostics, as I heard Pastor Rob McCoy say this week, and I think that's true. But let me just say this. I believe we've kind of tried to build a ministry where we just talk about pray, vote, and engage. So behind the scenes, we're pushing people that want to be leaders to work on campaigns, advocate, or register more Christian voters or activate them. But I believe every pastor in this country can talk about pray, vote, and engage without splitting their church. Now, they have to talk about civics, and they have to talk about the Bible. And this is where it gets sticky, right? I'm convinced, after about 150 pastors' meetings in the last 18 months, myself and our vice president, that pastors are not really worried about the Johnson Amendment and separation of church and state and all that stuff. That's a paper tiger. I mean, we've got pastors in Texas right now that are endorsing Trump from the pulpit, asking the IRS to come after them. And ADF, thank you, ADF, is leading that fight. I doubt it's ever gonna happen, because the IRS doesn't want to take on that fight because they're going to lose. So the reality is they're more concerned, and this is, again, after many, many conversations, and number one, pastors have the hardest job on the planet right now. So I love them, and I want to support them however we can. But their biggest fear is a tithe member walking out that door. That's their biggest concern. And so when you talk about, oh, well, will you please talk on the life issue, right? That should be, you would think that should be normal talk, to talk about that from the Bible. Well, what if one woman that's had an abortion gets offended and she doesn't hear healing and she doesn't hear freedom, or she doesn't hear something in my tone, and then she takes her whole family and walks out the door with her checkbook? That's in their subconscious, that's their biggest concern. So this is what I need you to do, is I need you to talk to your pastors with respect and love and say, hey, we've got this great Christian ministry, Christians Engaged. They will resource you. They will help you. They will help you do voter registration twice a year in your church. Do it when it doesn't look political, like 4th of July, Veterans Day, etc. They will help you mobilize your church to pray, vote, and engage, and they will start dripping on them what the Bible says and civic engagement, because you have leaders in your church that could really be stand-up leaders in the public square. And then they'll train your people on biblical worldview as well. However we can resource the churches, we do that for free. And we've seen small churches that have got involved with us, to medium churches, to Prestonwood Baptist in Dallas right now is doing a whole voter registration drive through all their small groups and asking everybody to take the pledge to pray, vote, and engage. It's possible if a pastor stands up and says, I'm going to start engaging here. And let me give you some hope. There is an awakening church happening. There is an awakening happening. Again, as Dr. Barna says, we're a remnant still, but I am seeing pastors that have never been called the political pastors. They've never been wanted to see as political, but they realize we're reaching a crisis point and they're looking for solutions, and we can fill that gap and help them. So just have hope, guys. Let's just keep going.
Seen that another thing Prestonwood is doing, and I would encourage Kentucky churches to do this, they're having a meet and greet with local candidates in their area. And
yes, I'm emceeing that with Jonathan Sines from Texas Values.
right.
Yes.
And churches,
a candidate forum.
So long as you invite all the candidates, are able to do that. Now, some may not show up. That doesn't prevent you necessarily from having the event, as long as the invitation's extended. But I think that would be a wonderful way for churches here in the Commonwealth to engage politically in a way that will benefit their congregants. Sue, I want to turn back to you for a minute. You mentioned a little bit about what's at stake in the presidential election, and there's been a lot of misconception about particularly some of the record of Governor Walz in Minnesota and the law that was recently passed that he signed and what it allows to take place in Minnesota. Set the record straight on what he's done there and why that record is an important part of the presidential election.
I am so glad to have the opportunity to express this to you because it doesn't get out there very much. But he is the governor of Minnesota, and recently he and the legislature passed a bill and removed protections. They had protections for infants that were born alive after an abortion. So if an abortion goes bad and the baby comes out alive, which I told my husband the other day, I have a hard time saying that sentence. That's the strangest sentence that I've ever said. So if a baby accidentally comes out alive after an abortion, go figure, you have to then treat that as two patients. Okay, so immediately then that baby would have medical care and usually a second doctor. And okay, so they had that law and they repealed it, and he signed that. The data that we have found reveals that 8 babies have been left to die since they did that, under his watch, under his administration. There's also a bill in Congress that many people don't know about. It's been there for 2 or 3 years now, and it's called the Women's Health Protection Act. Okay, you've heard of it. Great. Because if it were to pass, it would undo all of the state restrictions that states have put on. Little restrictions, big restrictions, Kentucky, I'm from Indiana, Texas, all of it, whoosh, gone. Now, I'm sure that would go to court and this and that, and it would take forever. But when in Congress, Governor Walz used to be a congressman, you'll remember. So he voted for that, and so did Kamala Harris voted for that bill, which is deceivably named. So make no mistake, they are on the probably far, far left side of this ledger on abortion, extreme abortion agenda, and unfortunately, not protecting the babies born alive. The other thing I wanted to remind you is that it was just last month in a publication, the name escapes me, it's in Wisconsin, Vice President Harris was quoted as saying that she wanted to eliminate the filibuster in the U.S. Senate. Right now, it takes 60 votes. She wants to make that just 50 plus 1 to eliminate the filibuster so that they can bring back protections for reproductive freedom, quote unquote, define that. So her disregard for the world's most deliberative body, our Congress, is only eclipsed by her disregard for the sanctity of human life. She would undo the filibuster just so she could do that. So at the presidential level, that's part of the pedigree that these two bring to the ticket.
Addia, do you want to say anything about the races that are happening here in Kentucky from a pro-life perspective?
Well, I'm looking here at my good friend Kent, and it was just great to be here with you today and honor you. But I think about this moment when we're talking about born alive and recognizing the child that there were two. And I remember a day we were in committee, and I happened to ask the ACLU what they believed. So we have to understand that worldview again, what they believed. And you videotaped it. You were videotaping that day, captured it or got it from the LRC. And it did kind of go viral as much as. But I asked the question, and it was a God thing, it wasn't me. When a doctor enters the room, an abortionist, there are the mother's on the table. How many patients are on that table? Do you remember that? And they said they could only identify the woman. They would not acknowledge this child. And I said, as a nurse, we know, as a medical professional, that there are always two patients on that, two individuals, two lives in that situation at that time. And you took that viral, and that's really been the fight that we continued, the battle that we're in, recognizing, whether it's here in Kentucky or in another state or at a national level, recognizing or refusing to recognize the life of that child. And so when you were saying that, it just reminded me how important that is. So as I look at Kentucky, it is vitally important. I heard someone say the other day that, Kentucky will be voting red nationally, but every vote matters. And I think that's what we've talked about so much. And I want to say something to women. There was an article written a couple years ago, and it was in Kentucky Today. Tessa published it. It was written by a senator's wife, and going back to the churches. And we often say that 1 in 4 women we know have had an abortion, most likely. Those are statistics. Dr. Bottom used statistics. So the article was, you know her. She's in your pews. And so as pastors, how do you pad the challenges? How do you pastor a church? And how do you not lose your members? But I want to say, as women who may be called, Greg left here, we do Wednesdays for women on Love and Lordship on the radio. They've got Family Foundation Fridays. But as women, if you're in ministry, in your church, in your community, it is so important that pastors form us to also reach out to women in the churches. Our crisis pregnancy centers are working very hard at this, but we have a particular mission. Actually, you have it given to you by God, ladies. Not that you men don't get me wrong. But as a bioethicist, the first essence of bioethics is a bias for bio, a bios for life. And because of our very nature that is written within our bodies, because our bodies themselves as women have a bios for life. So all of you ladies here today, if we had time, I would bestow an honorary doctorate on all of you. All of you actually hold a doctorate encoded in your hearts by God, created in the image of God, a bios for life, and your honorary doctorate in bioethics. So speak to your pastors, please, and join them in this ministry to bring forth truth.
Yeah, one of the things you said is, considering how many patients are on the table, and, my wife gave birth to our first child 9 months ago, and it's so interesting to me because I was privileged to be able to go to all of her prenatal appointments with her. And it's just fascinating that it seems the only time it's recognized that there are 2 patients is in the labor and delivery room. Fascinating to me. Now, my wife didn't have her prenatal care here in Kentucky. We were living in Northern Virginia at the time, outside of D.C., but that tells you a little bit about the ideology that's present in that area. Another thing, Addia, though, that you mentioned was pregnancy resource centers. We have a wonderful connection of PRCs across the Commonwealth, and one of the things that we've been trying to get through the General Assembly is a tax credit for donations to PRCs. Sadly, that has not materialized yet, but talk to us a little bit about why these PRCs are so important for the cause of life here in the Commonwealth.
Our pregnancy care centers are critical. They are the heartbeat that's out there where women turn to. And most of the time, what they're seeing right now, and I go around the state and meet with many of them, go to their banquets, go to their dinners, have conversations. We now have a bridge scholarship called Her Future Pregnant and Parenting. So we partner with them to scholarship women so that they can go complete their education. But women are coming in already abortion determined. So they're not, it used to be they would come there seeking help, maybe if they were thinking they were pregnant. When they arrive at our pregnancy care centers, the intense training is to reach that woman who already maybe has those pills in her purse. Maybe she's taken that first pill because she's obtained it out of state. But more are abortion determined because of the worldview and because of the influence of our culture, so they are so important. This tax credit issue is always a delicate issue. I just had a meeting with some folks that flew in from out of town about a month ago on the issue. And what can we do? I know I've got to talk to David, because often people fear that if they take anything from government, or if the pregnancy care centers get anything from government, that government's going to tell them what to do. And I can give you statistics on Planned Parenthood where the money's been flowing into them. And actually, when President Trump was in, he actually curtailed that funding going to Planned Parenthood for abortions. So we want to think about it the opposite way. How do we support here in Kentucky and in other states the very organizations that are providing services, healthcare services, and faith services to women and men at a time when they have a pregnancy, at a time that they find themselves in crisis? So we'll be doing more work, but sometimes the resistance is because there's a fear that, and I meet with them, they're a little bit split on this issue. If they accept anything, even a tax credit, that then government will step in to tell them what to do. That's going to be up to the General Assembly, so that when we put this in place, there are those protections that protect our pregnancy care centers just from that invasiveness of government. So, it is, I said, so they can't take Jesus out of the message.
I would just like to add, I totally agree with what Addia was saying. And there's a provider of funding for pregnancy care centers in a couple of other states. And he told me something once that I have never forgotten. He said the antidote to an abortion is not a referral, it's a relationship. These pregnancy care centers help with practical needs like help with housing and transportation and diapers and formula and all the expensive things, but they also come alongside and walk with her. They don't just say, here you go, see ya, good luck. They literally say, now, did you call and make that appointment? Here, let me help you. Or last week you said you were gonna do that, how can I help you do that? And these relationships will last a year up to 2 years. after the baby is born. And so when I speak, I work in politics, I work in policy. That's, I don't know how God gifted me, I don't know why. But when I talk about these things, I always want to challenge us, as we want to limit abortion, to come alongside and be the hands and feet of Jesus, and to help not just birth, but after birth. And I think our churches are perfectly suited to do that with child care and transportation and lots of other things. And so we want to build relationships, and we want to be that community for women who need that help.
Bunni, as we close in these last few minutes, give us a final charge as we are so close to this election.
Well, I think these women put it so brilliantly. I mean, we are called to be the hands and feet of Jesus. We are the salt and light. Thank you, Kent, for your amazing leadership for so many years. But this is the reality. You're going to have all your Christian friends are going to tell you these 3 words: God is in control. Have you heard this? God is in control. As my friend Raphael Cruz says, that is the biggest cop-out of the American church, is that God is in control. You are the hands and feet of Jesus. You are the salt and light. If we don't pray, vote, and engage, this nation that we're believing is going to make it to its 250th birthday in 2 years, this republic will not be strong if we, the body of Christ, do not fill in the gap. I have left my whole career making great money, not because I don't believe Christian candidates shouldn't get elected. They need to. But if the church doesn't stand up and be the answer, we're toast. So I need you to tell all your Christian friends that say God is in control, tell them, no, you go be the salt and light. You be the hands and feet of Jesus, because he limits his sovereignty to you. If you don't open your mouth to share the gospel will not be preached. If we don't send them, how can they go, right? That's the biblical narrative. So it's time for us to, I don't know about y'all, but that message by Dr. Barna just, how many of us are not reading our Bible every day? How many of us are not raising our kids and our grandkids to love Jesus with all their hearts? It's time for us to look our own lives in the face and go, we have to be the answer, church. And that's why we're here, and that's why we're so thankful to be working with the Family Foundation, because this is the movement. This is the remnant.
Ladies, thank you so much. We're going to have a short break, David. He's going to come up and tell us what to do. Let's thank these ladies one more time for their words.